Hey everyone. So, considering my subscriber count has multiplied since I released the first Uno Amalgam video, I think it's fair to say the idea was quite popular. It's provided me with more than enough motivation to make this second part, so thank you all. Now, if you haven't seen the first one, go watch it first or this video will be even more confusing than intended. I'll leave a link in the description. We're going to be picking up exactly where we left off last time. But before I can add even more shenanigans to the Amalgam, I have a couple clarifications to make. First of all, check out these visuals I cooked up. This diagram represents all of the cards in a standard deck of Uno. Throughout the video, I'm going to try and visually indicate the changes made to it as I continue to add more Uno versions. Here's a quick recap of what happened in the last one, but now with visuals. All of these names and specifics are still pending. 8 2-number card faces, one of each color, have the rotate 2 symbol. One wild card face has the all rotate symbol. One wild card face has the rotate to 10 symbol. One wild card face has the dancing symbol. 8 draw 2 card faces, one of each color, have the draw 2 dare symbol. 8 1 card faces, one of each color, have the draw 1 symbol. One wild card face has the wild draw 2 symbol. 8 5 card faces, one of each color, have the draw 5 symbol. One wild card face has the draw color symbol. Some of the bigger changes now. We got 4 new colors: orange, purple, pink, and gray, with 100 new cards total. This is just a good time to say all cards will be double-sided, doubling the size of the diagram. This side will be randomized at the end. This part is the front of the card, and the other is the back. Wild cards have various combinations of 4 colors in their symbol. 2 additional cards have been added with 4 total card faces of the 50-50 symbol. The veto card is also here. And here's a bunch more cards that got added to the game. There are 4 discard all cards with 8 total card faces, one on each color. There are 4 trade hands cards with 8 total faces, one on each color. And same thing with flip. There are 4 total flip cards with 8 total card faces, one on each color. Lastly, for the cards, the Skip Everyone cards get 4 total card faces. There are a couple of props, as I previously mentioned. We have the gold Uno coin and what I'm temporarily calling the Attack D10. The Attack D10, of course, representing the Uno attack machine. Finally, this game will be lefty-friendly, so all of the card arts are mirrored. Whew, that's a lot. Hopefully that all made sense, but if it didn't, ask questions in the comments and check out the rules document in the description. So a couple of you smarties caught a mistake I made in the last video. I knew I wouldn't be able to avoid making a mistake, but I didn't think I'd make one this early. So that long-winded wild draw 4 joke I made in the last video is incorrect. Apparently the way you play the wild draw 4 card incorrectly is if you play it when you have another card with a matching color to the discard pile in your hand. Now, this makes sense because the Wild Draw 4 card technically doesn't have a number, and therefore no way to match numbers. While this is more than likely a typing mistake on my part, I'd like to blame some random virus-filled website for containing a slightly incorrect version of the base Uno rules. I know they're out there. Anyways, thanks for calling me out on my mistake, you guys. I appreciate it. The next thing I want to address is scoring. This is something I didn't talk about at all last time because my group of friends and I honestly never use it, even though we probably should. So in base Uno, when you get rid of all of your cards and win the round, every other player gives you their hand, and all of those cards count as points for you. Each number card is worth its number in points. Special cards are worth 20, and any card with the wild symbol is worth 50. Whoever gets up to 500 points first wins. This usually results in multiple rounds being played. Now, that's all pretty easy to understand. The problem arises when you try to do the insane junk that I'm doing. I think scoring is something I'm just going to have to save for later for the sake of balancing, because as it stands, some of the cards I'm messing with could shatter that simple scoring system into teeny tiny pieces. Once I have a better idea of what I'll be dealing with, I'll include it in a future video, but for now, just follow the guidelines of base Uno if you want to try this for yourself. Next, I got a couple comments in the last video mentioning different unofficial versions of Uno. Now, I know absolutely nothing about the unofficial Uno landscape, but I'm sure there are cool things out there that some of you have enjoyed. I'm also sure some of them would make meaningful contributions to the Amalgam. That being said, for this project, I'm only planning on adding official Mattel rules to my Uno stew. I gotta stop somewhere. There has to be a finish line to reach after all. Once this project is complete in the year 20XX, if there's enough demand for it, I'd consider making an expansion to the Amalgam that includes only mechanics from the unofficial world of Uno. I'd need the creators' permission if they're independent developers though, so keep that in mind. That's something for the far, far future though. I just thought I'd bring it up so people know what to expect. Another requested topic, playing the game. How can I play it? Where's the deck? How come he didn't show it? How am I supposed to torture my friends and family if I can't get my hands on this evil entity? Well, here's what's up. It doesn't exist yet. I'm still, making it, clearly. But here's my plan. Physically, I'm at least going to be making one copy for myself once it's finished. And I'd show all of you, don't worry. I'd also sleeve every card because I am in fact a true Uno fan. Yeah, I see you. As for if any of you lovely people would be able to get your hands on a copy, it may be possible. Everything I've seen about Uno makes it seem like the mechanics aren't protected by anything like copyright or patent. And as long as I made my own artwork and logo and wrote my own rulebook and avoided any terminology that blatantly alludes to Uno, I think I'd be able to produce copies and sell it. Thus the pending status of all of the names and things. Gotta do a rebrand, might have to make a whole video on that. I planned on making my own artwork and junk anyway, so it may work out. I definitely need to do more research though, I don't want to get into any financial or legal trouble. Just know that it may be a possibility. Let me know if you'd want a physical copy of the Amalgam in the comments. Anyway, even if I didn't make a physical version, one way you guys would likely be able to play this game is Tabletop Simulator. I could make a downloadable Amalgam for people to enjoy with their friends digitally for free. I feel like that's a really good and legal solution that I could pull off. Of course, I wouldn't make the Tabletop Simulator version until I actually finished this darn thing. So you're going to have to be patient with me. Until this thing is finished, I'll tide you all over with some work-in-progress visuals and sprite work I plan on implementing into the final game, some of which you've already seen. The last thing I'll very briefly say is I know there is literally so much stuff in the console versions of Uno that I haven't covered yet. So far, I only covered the jump-in rule. I'll more than likely have to make an entire video just for the console versions, but the reason I added the jump-in rule early on is because in the little playtesting that has been done, the jump-in rule is pretty crucial in aiding the balance of the game. So don't worry, console fans, I'll get there eventually. Alright, enough jibber-jabber, let's add 10 more versions of Uno into the Amalgam. Woo! The 11th edition is the Uno Artiste Series. Yeah, the entire series. There were quite a few Uno Artiste decks, and I thought they were standard Uno decks until I read their descriptions. For those that don't know, the Artiste series contains decks of Uno that an artist made beautiful with their unique art style. They play exactly the same as base Uno, but there are also a few extra cards included that aren't meant to be used in the game at all. They contain even more artwork, but that's it. Just art. So you're welcome everyone. Thanks to the Artiste series, I'll be providing one double-sided card containing some cool pixel art I made just for the Amalgam, and it'll be completely pointless. I mean, it'll look cool, and you should admire it minutely, but it will have no gameplay purpose. How game-changing. The 12th edition is the much-requested Uno Spin. So, Uno Spin is Uno Spin is a spin-off of Uno. You get it, guys? A spin-off. It's a spin-off because you spin the wheel. It's a spin. The whole gimmick here is another instance of a bug, the Uno spin wheel. Half of the number cards labeled 1 through 5 have a swirly symbol on them, and if you play one of those cards, the next player in the turn order has to spin the wheel. This wheel is kinda bonkers with the stuff it can do, so if you spin the wheel, here's all of the things that could possibly happen. You could discard all of your cards until you have only 2 left. You could go from dead last to near victory instantly. I suppose it's nice to have things that help the player to provide contrast for when they get royally messed with by every other mechanic in the game. You could discard all cards that contain the same number, and you could discard all cards that contain the same color. These are really similar to rules I covered previously, so it's kinda cool I'll get to reuse a symbol maybe. Gotta love synergy. You could draw cards until you draw red or blue, another two wheel things that are similar. Again, another synergy, but I'll get to that in a second. You could trade hands, another synergy. Holy heck, we're on a roll. Or should I say, we're spinning. You could be forced to show your hand to another player, finally something different. You kinda have to just awkwardly fan out your cards and let everyone look at them for an unspecified amount of time. Let's be honest, you're really tryharding if you commit that dude's entire hand to memory. This next one caught me off guard. You could be forced to go to war with every other player. This one could have easily been a standalone mechanic, but here it is. So, if this is spun, everyone selects their highest value number card and reveals them at the same time. Note though that if you don't have any number cards, you can't participate in the war. Like, yeah, I don't feel like fighting today, guys, sorry, and I'm not just saying that because I have no weapons. Please don't approach me. The player with the highest number gets to discard that card they used in the battle. If there's a tie though, there's a second round with only the tied players. They play another card, and whoever wins discards all cards they played during the war. This goes on until there are no more ties. Absolutely nuts. I feel like this mechanic is going to be really interesting with the new numbers, like, 50. Instant win. Anyway, after all that, the turn order continues from the player who won the war, not necessarily the player who originally triggered the war by spinning the wheel. Finally, the last thing this wheel can do is trigger an event with a very original name called Uno Spin. I'm definitely going to be renaming this in the future. But basically, this one is a nose-goes type of situation. When this is spun, the first player to shout out loud, Uno Spin, gets to discard one card of their choice. Pretty fun and stressful, just how I like it. Okay, that was a lot, but I'm going to be making a couple alterations here. Firstly, the cards with the swirly symbols. Each of the 8 colors will have one swirly symbol for every number card labeled 1 through 5. Same as in regular Uno Spin, if you play one of these cards, you do the thing. Only in this case, you won't be spinning, you'll be rolling. That's right, in order to combat this bug, I've reached into my dice bag once again and pulled out a D8. The D8 will be standing in for the Uno Spin wheel. Now, whenever a swirly symbol is used on you, roll the D8 and refer to the instruction manual to figure out which of the above things are happening. It would be nice of you to inform all of the players playing which number on the D8 triggers the Uno Spin shouting event before the game starts, but I'm not going to judge you if you don't. Now, the more observant amongst you may have noticed there were 9 possibilities on the Uno Spin wheel, and if you count the sides on the D8, you may have noticed there are only 8 sides. So what gives? Well, this is my last alteration. The wheel event where you draw until you draw red and the one where you have to draw until you draw blue have been merged together. I just think it's better to have a completely different outcome for every face of the dice. So this merged symbol will be exactly the same as the draw color symbol from Uno Flip, which I talked about earlier. The only difference here being the previous player has to pick a color and now you have to draw until you find it. Now there are 3 props in the game and 2 of them are dice. I suppose the coin counts as a D2. Wouldn't it be cool if there was one of each standard die in the final result of the amalgam? The chances are slim, but if it's possible, I kinda want to make that happen. It would be satisfying for me. Only time will tell though. Who knows how many wrenches are about to be thrown into this operation. I wish I could say that was the end of the bugs, but we actually have a small infestation on our hands today. Moving right along, the 13th edition of the game is Uno Triple Play. Now, you may be looking at this thing right now thinking to yourself, ugh, this thing looks expensive, annoying, and complicated. And you'd be absolutely right. Unlike other bugs, however, the Uno Triple Play machine improves the balance of the amalgam more than it hurts it. Does that mean we're actually going to be using the machine? Absolutely not. But we are going to be borrowing as many of its mechanics as possible. So this thing adds a new major game rule. Instead of 1 discard pile, there are now 3 discard piles. Holy heck, this is actually the thing that balances the game quite a bit. More options for discarding allow for more wiggle room and less turns where you're forced to draw cards, so that's pretty neat. One thing the Uno triple play machine can do is randomly select which of the 3 discard piles are actually in play each turn. It'll usually make 1 or 2 of the discard piles off limits for someone's turn, which adds a little bit of unpredictability. Now, I'm actually going to exclude this mechanic intentionally because it's just so annoying. Like, ugh, I hate it. There's absolutely no reason to— Psych! We're adding another die. Woo! The Uno dice set dream lives on. The Uno triple play machine will be completely replaced by a D4. At the start of each of your turns, you roll the d4, and whichever number you roll is the number of the discard pile that you aren't allowed to use during your turn. At the start of the game, designate which discard pile is the first, second, third, and fourth. Wait, where did this sneaky 4th discard pile come from? We interrupt Uno triple play with a surprise appearance, Skippo! So yeah, the 13th and a half addition to the game is Skippo. I can already hear you screaming at me that Skippo is not, in fact, a variation of Uno. And to that I say, take a look at the box. It clearly says Uno on it, so therefore I have to include it. Nah, in all seriousness though, Skippo isn't really an Uno at all. There's a lot different here. But this is just a little cameo appearance from the Uno cinematic universe, so the only thing we're going to be taking from it is the 4th and most likely final discard pile. Just to restate, at the start of your turn, roll the d4. Let's say you roll a 2. This means you can't use the 2nd discard pile this turn. That's all for this mechanic, really. Returning back to our regularly scheduled program, another nifty feature of the Uno triple play machine is it apparently can overload. If a seemingly random number of cards are placed in any of the 3 discard piles, the system could overload, and the player who overloaded the machine has to draw anywhere between 1 and 4 cards. Now, normally the machine counts for you, and without the machine it would actually be super tedious to keep track of how many cards are in each of the 4 discard piles. But also, it's random anyway, so there's no way to keep track. So how can the overload feature be represented? Well, right now, there really isn't a way to indicate whether any particular discard pile is close to overloading. Darn you, you double-A battery-munching piece of junk. There's gonna have to be an alteration here. My solution is a new symbol which I'll be calling the overload symbol. If you play this card on a discard pile, that discard pile is now on the verge of overloading. From that point on, if another player plays a card on top of the card with the overload symbol, that player needs to roll the d4 and draw that number of cards. I think this is a pretty elegant solution to removing the technology. It provides the same looming danger the real machine had, and it also synergizes a lot nicer. I plan on putting the overload symbol on 8 of the existing 3 number cards. 1 of each color once again. This mechanic does come from Uno triple play after all. What's that? You thought that was all Uno triple play had to offer? Just a stupid bug? False. There are actually bountiful mechanics and symbols to add as well, so let's run down this list. The discard 2 of the same color card, oof, out of breath, allows you to discard it and then immediately discard another card matching its color. Other than needing a new name, this one is pretty self-explanatory. You can also play the card by itself if you want. It doesn't have a number though, so the next person would have to match its color to progress. As for the name, I'll get back to you. I gots to work on the theming of this game before I start giving things official names. I'll likely be renaming almost everything, but they'll all function as I described, so don't worry. Moving on, the rest of these cards I'm going to be changing slightly to fit the new dice mechanics. The Wild Clear card originally reset the overload timer of one of the discard piles on the triple play machine. Man, this machine is giving me a lot of trouble. Robots of the future, don't take that out of context, please. Instead, when you play this symbol, choose one of the 4 discard piles and shuffle it back into the draw pile, and place the wild clear card as the start of the new discard pile. Notably, this can disarm the overload symbol from earlier, allowing you to avoid it completely while resetting the discard pile it was on. This symbol will get placed on an existing wild card as well, so you get to pick the color that resumes play afterwards. Next, we have an interesting one, the Wild Giveaway card. If you play this card on top of a card with the overload symbol, you trigger the overload same as usual. But this time, when you roll the d4, you don't draw that many cards. Instead, you choose someone else to draw that many cards. Evil! You can even split up the cards between multiple players if you roll more than a 1 on the d4. This card is also wild, so yada yada on a wild card this symbol goes. Dang, that's everything. Uno triple play was kinda crazy. I feel like I may have underestimated how much these larger spin-offs of Uno have to offer, but that ain't gonna stop me. Let us move on. The 14th addition to the Amalgam is Uno Blitzo. This game is like my worst nightmare. For real. It's Uno, but there are no physical cards, and the only thing included is a bug that's like a Simon Says machine or a Bop It. Not even Uno. I can't believe I have to add this thing. But actually, there's like nothing to add? There's nothing here. I can't add the actual Simon Says mechanics because that's just blatantly not Uno. And almost everything else already exists in Uno, like skips and reverses and blah blah blah, keyword almost. One of the things you're able to do in Uno Blitzo is pass your turn. Kinda. I'm really stretching it here. So I'm going to implement that. On one of the existing wildcards, I'm going to place a new symbol, the pass your turn symbol. Instead of playing this card on top of any discard pile, you instead place it in front of yourself. From that point on, you can play that card during your turn to effectively pass your turn. Afterwards, you choose the color that resumes play like any other wild card. Yep, that's it. That's all Uno Blitzo gets. I have no respect for it. I despise it. Real Unos have cards. Up next, we have yet another game that isn't Uno, but still very closely related. I made a joke about it at one point. It's called Dos, also known as the 15th addition to the Amalgam. I'm not sure I'd consider this Uno's true sequel or anything. It kinda just seems like yet another spin-off with a few gimmicks to keep things fresh. I, of course, will be adding these gimmicks. First, we got a couple new game rules from Dos, the first of which I'm calling the Sum Rule. This rule states that if you have 2 number cards in your hand that add up to one of the numbers on top of any of the discard piles, you can play both of these cards on top of each other in the same turn. Yet another way to play multiple cards at once. This next one I'm calling the Patience Rule. If you have a card in your hand that perfectly matches a card on one of the discard piles during your turn, you can play that card and then immediately play any one additional card from your hand. This one is really interesting because it will give people a dilemma. Do you A, jump in when you have a perfect match, or B, wait for your turn to come around so you can discard 2 cards instead of 1? The risk being that card may be covered up by the time your turn comes around. Gives you more reason to hesitate and think, and that's fun. Also, you can't use this rule if it would remove all remaining cards from your hand, so I guess that's a downside. Now we have a couple new cards and mechanics. The Wild Dos card counts as 2 cards of any number or color, but not both. This allows for some shenanigans about the whole, saying Uno thing. Since it's just 1 card but it counts as 2, if anyone calls you out for not saying Uno, boom, got him. Also, it's wild. Onto a wild card it goes. The last thing from Dos is the Wild Number cards. This will be adding 4 more physical cards to the game. One of these symbols needs to go on each color, similar to other previous mechanics. When you play this card, it can be any number. You get to pick. All numbers are on the table as long as it already exists in the game. So you can say 50 and ruin someone's day, maybe. What fun! I shall continue now. The 16th addition to the Amalgam is Uno Cuatro. This one actually came out this year, so this is like super hot and fresh. TLDR, this is not Uno, but actually just an advanced game of Connect 4 in disguise. While I will not be adding a Connect 4 board to the Amalgam, I will add a couple of its strange mechanics regardless of how little chance they actually have of happening. I have a really stupid idea. So you know how there are 4 discard piles now? Let's pretend those 4 piles are a row. Just like in Uno Cuatro, Connect 4. If you can get all 4 of these piles to have a matching color, number, or symbol during your turn, you straight up win. That's right. A new and incredibly difficult win condition that doesn't involve saying Uno or getting rid of all of your cards. How dumb is that? In all seriousness, the chances of the stars aligning for you are pretty slim. If you did manage to pull this off and remember this obscure rule though, oh boy, everyone would hate you, and that's what Uno's all about, everyone. There's one other mechanic that can get added here too. The -2 symbol is not a number, but a mechanic. When you play it, you force the next player to discard 2 cards from their hand at random, and then immediately draw 2 cards from the draw pile. This could be a really good way to force someone to discard their best cards, but there's still luck involved. This symbol will go on 8 of the existing 2 cards, one of each color. Moving on from Uno Cuatro, the 17th edition comes from Uno Mario Kart. Now this one poses a real problem, like an actual serious problem. This version of Uno has what I like to call a card art mechanic, or CAM for short. A CAM is when there's one mechanic that interacts with every other card in the game, usually in a unique way. As a result, every card in the game has a piece of art that only interacts with one symbol. This cannot happen. If I were to include every CAM that I know of, there would be no space left on the card for literally anything. It would just be a splatter painting of random meaningless symbols that only have a small chance of even being relevant in any given game. So, I have a solution that can solve this problem, and to help explain that, I'll first describe the one unique mechanic of Uno Mario Kart, the Wild Item Box card. Yep. So when you play this card, you draw the next card in the draw pile, and then place it on any discard pile. And things happen depending on what little symbol it has in the bottom left corner of that card. Here are all of those things. Mushroom, you get to take another turn. Banana, the player before you in the turn order draws 2 cards. Green shell, any player of your choice draws 1 card. Lightning, all players except you draw a card and you get to take another turn. And finally, Bomb, you draw 2 cards. After you do the things, it's wild, so you get to choose which color resumes play. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about card art mechanics. Every single card in the Uno Mario Kart deck has one of these little symbols only to interact with one new mechanic. So obviously everything about this card and mechanic will have to be renamed later, and the symbol itself will get placed on a wild card. But how do I plan on solving this card art issue? Well, my answer is, maybe predictably, another die. A D6 this time. Now, hopefully in the future there will be a more substantial purpose for this D6, but I have no way of knowing that right now. Here's how the new version of the item box mechanic will work. If you play the wild item box symbol, roll the D6, and each number corresponds with one of the 5 outcomes listed previously. And if you roll a 1, nothing happens. It's like when your item box gets stolen right before you were about to pick it up. Man, I hate that. You do the thing that it tells you, and then choose the color that resumes play. Boom. Easy. I understand the D6 may be a bit overkill for this one, but it's another addition to the Amalgam's dice set which my brain likes. And hopefully a greater purpose will be found later. The 18th edition is Uno The Office. I hate The Office, and I'm only doing this because I have to. I'm going to be giving The Office as little screen time as possible. The only unique thing from the Office version of Uno is the wild Kevin's Famous Chili card. Ugh. If you draw this card, you have to clumsily drop your entire hand on the table or ground. This is the signal for everyone else to do the same exact stupid thing. Last player to do this has to draw 2 cards once everyone picks up their hand. While this mechanic is objectively funny, it'll be made funnier by removing the Office branding. Onto another wild card it goes. Heck The Office, you're welcome. Moving on. The 19th edition is Uno Flash. I really should have called this episode the Bug and Dice Saga because here we have yet another bug. This one is quite simple though. The Uno Flash machine is mainly a big randomizer. The way Uno Flash works is every time you end your turn, you press a button on the machine, and it randomly assigns a player as the next player in the turn order. I'm not going to be implementing that aspect of it because it makes a lot of cards completely unusable. But a new game rule could be added here where the player who starts the game should be chosen at random, just like in Uno Flash. One thing that I will add from Uno Flash is the slap card. The slap symbol itself will need 4 more physical cards for it, 1 of each color again, yada yada. When you play this card, you slap it. Then everyone else needs to race to slap it too. If you're the last player to slap the card, you draw 2 cards. Not that severe of a punishment, honestly. I really got away with that one without a scratch. That's the last bug, right? Wrong! The 20th and final addition to the Amalgam in this video is Uno Tippo. So, Uno Tippo is the version of Uno with a giant scale. Yet another bug we need to work around. So normally in Uno Tippo there are 2 discard piles, and if one of them gets too heavy, the cards in that pile spill everywhere. The person who caused the spill has to draw 2 cards. So obviously, as much as I appreciate a good scale, it has to go. Here's my alternative. So this game is going to have a lot of cards. So many. These cards will be in a draw pile and 4 discard piles. My idea here is if anyone causes a spill where any of the discard piles become disorganized or fall over, that player who messed it up needs to draw 2 cards. While that new game rule may not sound like it emulates the scale very well, the accompanying cards from Uno Tippo may change your opinion on that. The Wild Tilt card is one such card. I have a fun plan for how this mechanic could work without the scale. So, when you play this card on a discard pile, from that point on, that's the only discard pile that can be used. This makes the game much more difficult temporarily. The only thing that can make the other discard piles fair game again is A, the selected discard pile tips over or becomes disorganized, and same as before, the person who made the mess has to draw 2 cards. Or B, the draw pile runs out, resulting in a shuffling of the discard pile. This'll be a real painful experience for everyone. Yay! I suppose someone could always take the dive and slap the discard pile to tip it over, but that's their funeral. Have fun with your 2 extra cards. I'm playing to win. Finally, the stop symbol. This symbol will be placed on 1 copy of each of the number cards labeled 1 through 5, with 1 on each color again. When you play a card with this symbol, the discard pile you played it on can no longer be used. There are of course some exceptions and ways to break this curse. Cards with this symbol can be placed on top of other cards with this symbol, but they still need to match with color or number like normal. Cards with the wild symbol can also be played over cards with this symbol. Additionally, if every discard pile has one of these cards on top, all of the discard piles become fair game, because according to the rules of Uno Tippo, they cancel each other out. This rule applies on a turn-by-turn basis, so while the player before you may have been able to use any discard pile, if it advances to your turn and not every discard pile has one of these symbols, you're limited to the discard piles that don't. And with that, we've more than doubled the size of the Amalgam. Feels nice. Of course, you guys left me tons of suggestions in the comments on which versions I should add, and I kinda just picked a random 10 for this video. That being said, I have a list of versions I haven't covered yet, but they'll have to wait until next time. Don't let that stop you from leaving even more suggestions because I read all of the comments. Just like last time, the rules for the Amalgam so far will be in the description for you to read. I'll be updating the rules over the next day or 2 to incorporate things added in this video. With every version I add, the Amalgam becomes more and more tedious to replicate with existing versions of Uno, and I think that's funny. But the rules are there for you if you want to try them out. I want to take one more moment to thank you all for the overwhelming support recently. My channel is growing, and that makes me happy. Now I can bother even more of you with my silly nonsense. Speaking of, if you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out the Massacard's videos on my channel. If you like hit and roll games like Mafia or Among Us, you'll definitely like Massacard's. It's an original game I designed to be the ultimate hidden roll game. Well, I suppose the video has to end now. Please be patient with me while I make the next video in this series. These videos are a lot of work. Thank you. Like the video if you in fact liked the video. Subscribe for the next part of the Uno Amalgam series, and I'll see you all in the next one.